Okay, kiddos, so today factoring just basic trinomials. When we say a basic trinomial, basically what that means is there's no number in front of the first variable. Okay, so all of our equations today are not going to have a number in front of the first variable. That means it's a basic trinomial, which we can factor super easy in comparison to if there were a number in front, that would be a lot more difficult. Okay, so when we factor, we break a trinomial. So for example, I have x squared plus 3x plus 2. That's a trinomial because there's 3 terms. We're going to break that into a binomial, x plus 2, x plus 1. Okay, 2 binomials. So it's the opposite of what we did in the warm-up, which was multiplying 2 binomials to get the trinomial. When we factor, we have to consider the factors of our last term. Now, a factor is just 2 numbers that multiply together to make that number. Okay, super simple as long as you know your multiplication tables. If you don't know your multiplication tables, now this is going to be a really good time to open up a separate tab, make sure you have a multiplication table open so you can use it. Okay, so for example, what are 2 numbers that multiply to give me 12? I need all the options. What is that? Thank you for letting me know. Okay, what are the factors of 12? 6 and 2. Okay, so we have 2 and 6. You said 1 and 12. 3 and 4. Okay, so again, you're going to need these because we're going to be using one of those as an option later. Okay, what are the factors that give you 30? 2 and 15. 10 and 3. 1 and 30. One more. 5 and 6. Okay. So again, sometimes you get numbers that are pretty easy. 30, we use that a lot. But if you get numbers like 51, which students oftentimes think is prime, it's not. Okay. It could be a little more difficult. So again, if you're not really strong on the multiplication tables, sometimes you are going to have to break out a calculator and just see what divides into something. Okay. But for today and for the homework tonight, they're all pretty straightforward. Okay. Okay. So to factor, you essentially are answering these 2 questions for every problem. Now we're going to look at a lot of different iterations of where the signs can be. But for the first one, it's super simple. We have x squared plus 7x and plus 12. Okay. So that means we need 2 numbers that add together to make 7, because that's the middle number. And we need 2 numbers that multiply to make the last number, which is 12. Now, here's the part that makes it kind of like a puzzle. It has to be the same 2 numbers. The same 2 numbers have to add up to 7 and multiply to make 12. Okay, so hopefully you're all like already in your head, you might know the answer. But the way we start every problem is we always look at the last number and we think about the factors. So again, we just did this. What are the factors of 12? 3 and 4, 1 and 12, 2 and 6. Okay. Now, if I look at these options, it should be pretty clear which one is going to add up to 7. Okay. But let's just say we didn't know, for example. If I added 2 and 6, what would that give me? 8. That's not going to work. 1 and 12. Add 13. That's not going to work. But 3 plus 4, that gives me 7. That's what I want. So we write that down in the blank spots. Again, it has to work for both of these questions. Okay. And then we just double check. Does 3 plus 4 equal 7? Yep. Does 3 times 4 equal 12? Yep. So the way you write your answer is you look at the lead variable, which is x. Then you write down the first number, plus 3. And then x, and the second number, plus 4. Okay. If I switch those around, if I wrote +4 in the first one and +3 in the second one, is that the same thing? Yes. You guys know what that's called when you can move things around like that and they're the same thing? Starts with a C, commutative, okay? So when you can move things around, it's called commutative property, and that's okay because multiplication is commutative. So x plus 3, x plus 4, if you move them around, it'd be the same thing, okay? So when you write your answers tonight for homework, you can write it either way and it will still be right either way. Okay. Now this is a really straightforward example because the 7 and the 12 are both positive. Okay, let's try another one where the 7 and the 12, or the numbers that are in the middle and the end, are both positive. Okay, here's another pretty straightforward example. Okay, here we have x squared plus 12x plus 32. So again, looking at the two questions I have to answer, I need two numbers that add up to the middle number, which is 12, and two numbers that multiply to be the last number, which is 32. Okay, so I'm going to start the same way. I need factors of 32. What are numbers that multiply to make 32? 1 and 32, 2 and 16, very good. What else do we got? 4 and 8. Okay, is there anything else? No, it's pretty good. Okay, now look at our options. Okay, pretty clear, right? 1 and 32, that's going to add up to 33. That's not going to work. 2 and 16, that's going to make 18. That's not going to work. What's 4 plus 8? Exactly what we wanted. Okay, so let's put it in the blanks and see if it works. 4 plus 8, 4 plus 8. Remember, it has to be exactly the same for both of these sentences. Okay, 4 plus 8 is 12. That works. 4 times 8 is 32. That works. So how do I write the answer? X plus 4, x plus 8. Very good. Okay. Now, like I said, these ones are pretty straightforward because both of the terms that we're looking for are positive. When we start adding in negatives, that's when things get a little more complicated. Okay. So the next two examples, we're going to look at both situations. What happens if the last number is negative? What happens if the middle term is negative? Now, normally, I wouldn't be telling you the patterns here. I would let you experiment over the course of 2 or 3 days. You'd try to notice some patterns and you'd figure it out on your own. But we're on a time crunch, so I'm just going to give you the information. Okay, so normally when you see a problem like this, okay, you would just try different things and see what works. Okay, but we don't have time for that. So I'm just going to tell you the pattern here. When the last number is negative, right here, we have two numbers that add up to be 2 and two numbers that multiply to make negative 24. Okay, so let's think about this logically. What's the only way that two numbers multiply to make a negative number? A little louder. Only one of them can be negative. Okay, if they're both negative, when we multiply them together, what happens? It becomes positive. So one number is negative. Okay. So again, when the last number is negative, that means one of these blank spots is going to be a negative number, only one. Okay. So then we start the same way. We look at the factors of 24. So we have 1 times 24. We have 2 times 12. We have 3 times 8 and 4 times 6. Okay. Now at this point, we don't know which number is going to be negative. So we have to think about both situations. It's kind of like a puzzle. You try things. If it doesn't fit, you try something else. Okay. So you can kind of narrow it down by looking at the number that we need. We need the numbers to add up to 2. Okay. 1 and 24, there's no way that's going to be 2. So this is kind of gone. Okay. 2 and 12, if the 2 is negative, that's 10. If the 12 is negative, that's negative 10. That's not going to work either. 3 and 8 is either 5 or negative 5. That's not going to work. But 4 and 6, which number should be negative if I want it to be positive 2? The 4, okay? So let's see if it works. We're going to plug these numbers in and see if it works for both lines. So if I put -4 right there and 6 here, and then -4 here and 6 here, -4 plus 2, that gives me, -4 plus 6, that gives me +2, that works. -4 times 6 is -24, that works. Easy peasy. Okay. So there's a lot of things to consider here, a lot of steps to this. But the thing you have to remember is when you look at the 3 numbers, when you look at the trinomial, if the last number is negative, then that means one of the numbers in the answer is going to be negative. So my final answer is x minus 4 and x plus 6. Cool beans? Okay. We have one more way to write the signs, okay? So we just talked about the pattern if the last number is negative. Now let's look at what happens if the middle number is negative. Okay, so if the middle number is negative, for example, here, we need 2 numbers that add up to be -10, but multiply to be a +24. Okay, what is the only way that 2 numbers add up to be a negative, but multiply to be a positive? If one of them is negative, then they're going to multiply to be a negative number, right? Because a negative times a positive makes a negative. If they're both positive, how are they going to add up to a negative? They have to be both be negative, okay? So the only way for 2 numbers to multiply to a positive, but when you add them together, it's a negative, is both numbers have to be negative. Okay. So again, let's look at our options. We have the same number we did on the last problem. So we have 1 and 24. We have 2 and 12. We have 3 and 8. And then 4 and 6. Okay. Now, because we know they both have to be negative, we could just make everything negative. Okay. And now it's pretty easy to see which one is going to work. -1 and -24, when we add those, that makes -25. That's not going to work. -2 and -12 make -14. That's not going to work. -3 and -8 make -11. It's not going to work. But -4 and -6 make -10. Ding, ding, ding. That's what I wanted. Okay. So let's put them in the blanks. -4, -6, -4, -6. Okay. When I add them together, they make -10. When I multiply them, they make +24 because a negative times a negative makes positive. And so my final answer, x minus 4, x minus 6. Okay. So we've looked at every situation here. We looked at what happens when both numbers are positive. Okay. When the last number is negative. And when the middle number is negative. Again, normally, what we would do is you would practice and you'd find these patterns on your own. But because we're in a time crunch, just make sure you understand that when you see one of the numbers is negative, it means that one of the factors has to be either negative or both have to be negative.